it's not just marketers who struggle with having too much data and too few tangible outcomes. It's pretty much everyone, everywhere. I think our approach with our clients has to be identifying good solutions to business problems and a business impact we're mutually trying to solve for.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Identity Architects, the InfoSum podcast that spotlights the leaders in the media industry shaping the future of data-driven advertising. I'm your host, Ben Cicchetti, and this week I had the opportunity to sit down with Zora Senat, Chief Commercial Officer at Verisk Marketing Solutions, to discuss data collaboration, partnerships, data insights, the consumer experience, and much, much more. Before we get into that conversation, this is a reminder to hit that subscribe button to be alerted when new episodes of Identity Architects are available. But without any further delay, here's my chat with Zora. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by Zora Senat, Chief Commercial Officer at Verisk. Zora, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Ben. Thanks for having me here.
I'm super excited to learn more about you, more about Verisk. But for anyone who may be unfamiliar, can you just give us a quick introduction to yourself?
Yeah, sure. So as you mentioned, my name is Zora Senat. I'm Chief Commercial Officer at Verisk Marketing Solutions. I'm currently sitting in my home just outside of Chicago, where I've lived and worked for most of my adult life. I've been with the company for about 6 years in different capacities. Before that, I was actually a client for almost a decade. So I've had the opportunity throughout my career to put my hands into just about every consumer marketing file out there, every identity resolution service that exists, which makes me and the team that I work with a somewhat of a valuable asset to our clients who are on various stages of their journeys with third-party data, trying to make sense of all the solutions out there to grow their businesses cost effectively. So that's who I am, and that's what I do.
Love that. I love the transition from client to working at a company. I always find that fascinating. And I always think it gives you kind of a unique insight into the business and kind of the advantages of the business to people. And I'm sure we will dig into a lot of that as we get through this podcast. But we'll start the way we always do, which is with a series of quick-fire questions to get to know you a little bit better. Starting with, what is your earliest memory of advertising?
Ben, you're throwing the hard balls right away. That's a really hard question.
Coming in hot.
I did listen to all 80 episodes of this podcast to figure out what people didn't do. Yeah, I thought a lot about this question. This is probably the one I spent the most time on. So I have a very early memory of I didn't have cable growing up as a kid, so I would go to my grandfather's house where he did have cable. And my favorite thing to do was just sit in front of the TV guide channel and just like explore all of the possibilities. I think I'd spend hours just staring at it and figuring out what to watch. I think the stat now is that people spend maybe 7 to 8 minutes a night, like thinking about what to watch. But me, I would sit there for like 45 minutes before I just ultimately ended up picking like MTV or Nickelodeon. But also like as an advertiser, as a marketer, like how valuable was that real estate and how poorly was it used? If you go and Google like TV guide channel ads, you'll be amazed with how far we've come.
Wow. I will definitely go and Google that now. And you're right. It was such prime real estate in many ways because you had that kind of undivided attention as people, as you say, try to figure out what they're going to watch. And it was a different world back then where, you didn't have social media and other things to kind of point you in the direction of content. You had to go and hunt it. If not through the visual guide, through, in my day, it was literally a physical TV guide that you would flick through and find what you're going to watch. So I love that. And if you take yourself back to those days, staring at that TV guide channel, what did you want to be when you were younger?
Oh, well, I was a theater kid. So, I grew up with my mom, single mom. So as, a lot of kids do get enrolled in a lot of programs, a lot of activities before and after school. So theater was the one that spoke to me the most. So I was in theater programs, after school, over the summer. Eventually, I ended up going to a performing arts high school. And then beyond that, I ended up going to Northwestern here in Chicago to study theater as well. And by the time I got there, I was pretty much entrenched on more of the business side of theater. Having kind of grown up on the stage, I became more interested in how to actually own and operate, a production. So I entered Northwestern focused on being a producer. I was a board member. For those of you who don't know, Northwestern has the largest student theater coalition in the country, and so I didn't really take a lot of theater courses. My coursework was more so like statistics and a lot of humanities classes, which I definitely overpaid for. But my job there was to, you know, manage a P&L, hire talent, make an ROI on our production, so we could do the next one bigger and better. So I had a pretty entrepreneurial mindset from an early age. I think theater and the arts are a great foundation to practice strategic thinking, creativity, and then generally speaking, it's a pretty undervalued experience. So as I hire younger people, I'm always really attracted to artistic and creative backgrounds.
I love that. I love that. I was a theatre kid as well. Some would say I'm still a bit of a drama queen, but that's for a different
Oh
podcast.
yeah, you take theater kid out of the theater. You can't take the theater out of kid for sure.
There you go. So, what was your first job in either advertising or marketing then?
Yeah, so I did get some exposure to like local advertising. I worked for a news station in my summers in Dallas between I'd spent summers in Dallas, winters in Chicago, which was a bit extreme. Um, so I got a lot of exposure to local advertising there, but my true exposure really came from my first job running paid media and demand generation for a data company, and we were selling direct mail, email, and phone lists. So I literally leveraged targeted marketing to market to marketers about how to run better targeted marketing campaigns. And so effectively I've kind of built my whole career around that construct marketing to marketers about marketing, kind of doing and teaching and approaching data sales from a marketer and a practitioner's perspective, conducting experiments. The scientific method is very, very much front and center in all things advertising. So, I'd setting those independent, dependent, and control variables and figuring out what works, what doesn't. Um, yeah. So it was a great gig to kind of kick off my career.
Yeah, and what do you think it was then about the industry that kind of drew you in? And then, all these years later, what kind of keeps you in the industry to this very day?
Yeah. So as a marketer, I think the perception you build in the world can just be so much bigger than the ad dollars you place behind it. If you're very purposeful, very strategic, very creative, it just kind of harkens back to that theater mindset. Doing things on a shoestring budget. Marketers I've found, are very savvy business people in that way. Um, and I just enjoy working with clients who, think big and have big ambitions, for their brands and their businesses.
Yeah. And I guess in your role today, you must be able to meet lots of people at different stages of their career, and a lot of them who are just coming in to the media and advertising industry today. So what advice would you give to someone who's just starting their career in the crazy world we call media and advertising?
I think it depends on where you come from. So for me, with an arts background, I needed a lot of hands-on experience buying media, measuring media for performance, and I needed business acumen. So, I worked during the day buying media, and then I was packaging and selling off, data solutions, and then I got my MBA in the evenings. That was what I needed to do. So, I'd also question, what about media and advertising is really appealing to a young person? I mean, I think the outcomes tend to be what draw us and draw people into marketing. The flashy ads, the social culture, which certainly I enjoy. But really, I think all of the inputs required to make advertising work is like very unsexy. Um, it's complex, it's technical, involves a lot of math. So I'd make sure that there's like a genuine curiosity that exists to, problem solve, learn new concepts, keep up with the industry, keep up with the technology, and how and where, consumers are engaging with advertising. Now, if that genuine curiosity exists, then it's just about kind of bridging the gaps in any competencies or incompetencies, if you will, in their understanding.
Yeah, for sure. I think that curiosity is so important. I think we work in such an ever-changing industry. It can be an overwhelming industry at times. What about our industry? I guess a two-part question. What keeps you awake at night? Like, what's the stress factor? And then what gets you up in the morning? So kind of like the motivational factor.
Then two answers: my kids and my kids.
There we go.
Time. There's absolutely no time to think about it. No, seriously. What keeps me up is kind of, I don't know, when you're operating in it, in the thick of it, and you are, ambitious and trying to build something, with a team. um Generally just some anxiety about what you didn't accomplish during that day or didn't get done to kind of move the needle forward. It's not like you put it down or you end your day and the work is done. And these are things that continue they're on a continuum. And so, I think the key thing that kind of gets me up again in the morning is, I can quiet down that anxiety at night just by sending myself an email. And then I know that a better person is going to pick it up in the morning and continue down that path.
Yeah, I love that idea. I write a ton of notes to myself, whether it's on the Notes app or I'll Slack myself things to remember to kind of get it off your head, and then you're able to kind of let that go and relax. You kind of mentioned just how our industry is incredibly complex, and you have to have a natural curiosity to keep up with it and to understand the kind of the current best practices and so on and so forth. Given how complex it is, how would you describe what you do within media and advertising to a 10-year-old?
Hmm. Well, the combined age of my kids is about 10 years old. So,
There we go.
um, I the way I put it is I help make the ads you see on TV, your computer, your phone, in your mailbox more appealing to you, more interesting to you. That's how I've described it to 10-year-olds and also 75-year-olds. That's my experience.
Yeah, it works on both sides of the equation.
Clearly, yes.
I love that. I love that. We'll dive into some of our more topic related questions now. Before we get into the kind of the wider industry, for anyone who might be unfamiliar, can you give me an overview of Verisk? Kind of what do you guys do? What role do you play in the ecosystem today?
Absolutely. So Verisk Marketing Solutions is a business unit within the underwriting division of Verisk Analytics. So, fascinating business. It's a 50-year-old insurance analytics business, which started as a nonprofit in 1971. It was created, by the insurance industry for the insurance industry, to solve a costly problem, which was this processing of state level rules, forms, loss cost information, um, for underwriting insurance policies. So it began kind of as a clearinghouse or a bureau, if you will, for consolidating and making sense of that data to reduce the cost of doing that work for the carriers. So over the years, Verisk has evolved. We're a Fortune 500 company. We're a publicly traded company. We specialize in data and analytics to support insurers to make informed decisions, optimize their operations, and better serve their clients, which is us also. So Verisk Marketing Solutions is the marriage of two recent acquisitions by Verisk. It was a behavioral data company was acquired in 2020. That was Jornaya, and an identity company, Infutor Data Solutions, where I originated, was acquired in 2022. So both of those companies have a combined 35-year history, supporting both the buy side and sell side of advertising. The brands we work with are largely financial services companies, so insurance carriers who will spend upwards of $10 billion on advertising this year. We work with banks, non-bank lenders, credit card companies, and a long tail of other verticals as well. We have lead intelligence and compliance solutions for those brands. We also have targeted audiences, first-party enrichment services to improve customer acquisition, outcomes, cross-sell and retention outcomes as well. And then our sell side partners are largely, other data compilers, advertising technology and measurement providers, media publishers, web publishers. So pretty much anything that sits between the advertiser and the consumer. There we deliver the same identity and insights, but we do that indirectly to support our partners' value-added products and services.
Yeah, it's super interesting. We are very much a data-driven industry. If anything, we are now just a data-first marketing industry. So let's get into the kind of some of those specifics you've already touched on. How today is Verisk Marketing Solutions helping brands enhance their data strategies and improving that customer acquisition, that retention, and the kind of overall marketing experience that you've touched on?
Yeah, specifically as it concerns our behavioral data, which is our most
Yeah.
unique and valuable asset. Verisk Marketing Solutions has an eyewitness view into shopping activity across a network of tens of thousands of comparison shopping sites. We've built up these relationships over the past 10 years. So we can see very early on in the purchasing process when a consumer is in market for a particular product or service. This is super valuable for our financial services clients because unlike, like a credit trigger, which is the traditional method for, understanding when a consumer might be in the market for a financial services product, we can see specifically which product a consumer is in market for. So if we're talking insurance, we can see home, auto, life, health. On the FinServ side, HELOC refis. This is much more valuable, actionable information for a client who might want to cross-sell, a bundled policy to an auto insurance customer, for example. So with that data at their disposal, our brands can deliver a very personalized treatment to a consumer at the right time when they're actively in market shopping for that specific product.
Yeah, it is almost giving them, or it is giving them that kind of right message, right time, right place moment for them, which is just incredibly important. And one of the things I was super curious about when I was looking at your career journey, it included kind of significant roles forming strategic partnerships. And obviously, I'm a big believer in collaboration, hence why I work for InfoSum. So what do you believe are the key elements of a successful partnership in the kind of MarTech space? And how do those partnerships contribute to the overall success of a company?
Yeah, I mean, I think those partnerships contribute to the overall success of an industry, really. Like if you think about the network effect that we can build through strategic partnerships. I love kind of philosophizing about alliances and partnerships. We actually wrote a playbook where we mapped the whole ad ecosystem and what sort of value we can bring to each corner of it. Consumer data is a horizontal application. So, I mean, we've got all manner of intelligence about consumers and the households in our graph, but we can't go direct into every vertical with it, right? So what we do through our partner model is we match data with value-added services. Um, so a few core principles kind of operate. A few core principles we operate around. Number one is our partner's customer base one we want to do business with? Is it complementary? And if it is complementary, are we bringing differentiated insights and solutions? Or is our data kind of limited to the more, commoditized identity or demo-based assets where we can still deliver value, in the form of incrementality, better coverage, better corroboration, accuracy? That's number one. Number two, does their business model complement ours? Take one partner we work closely with. We want to sell more data. That's how we drive dollars. They want to sell more. That's a very ship. And so that's one that we can leverage to create more value, not just for us, but also for our shared clients, and select on mutual accounts in a more targeted way. But then most important, and I mean, I think if we fail on this particular dimension, then there's no point in exploring the others, is, are they ready, willing, and able to partner? Some companies on the surface look like they'd be good, you know, good candidates, but maybe they can't get out of their own way, or the infrastructure doesn't support partnership. And I've seen ourselves and other businesses kind of spend their most valuable asset, which is time, on partnerships that just aren't going to create the sort of value that we need to see in an engagement.
I agree. There needs to be that kind of mutual readiness, that mutual kind of end goal as well. That, what are you actually trying to achieve in the partnership? And I think, you'll know this better than me, but we have the opportunity to gain access to so much data today that I think marketers often struggle with turning rich data into tangible outcomes. So how does Verisk help bridge that gap, kind of translating intelligence into actions that actually drive real world impact?
Yeah, I mean, it's not just marketers who struggle with having too much data and too few tangible outcomes. It's pretty much everyone, everywhere. I struggle with the same thing in my own function. I think our approach with our clients has to be, identifying good solutions to business problems and a business impact we're mutually trying to solve for. Before we start, exchanging data, we really need to work with our clients to identify that. And then once we set that North Star and have that guidepost, then it's just a matter of kind of continuing to keep that front and center in the conversation, as we go about, incorporating more data and always taking it back to center, because the data itself can, I mean, we're all very genuinely curious individuals, so it can take us down paths that maybe don't necessarily align to that business impact that we set out to accomplish together.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's impossible in 2025, or even for the last few years, really, to talk about data and not talk about privacy. They come very much hand in hand. And we are seeing kind of an evolving privacy regulation and privacy landscape, especially in the US. How does Verisk Marketing Solutions ensure compliance with kind of an evolving regulatory landscape while delivering valuable insights to clients? And what kind of measures are in place to maintain consumer trust and ensuring the underlying consumer doesn't get forgotten in all of this?
Yeah. I mean, beyond, our business policies and standards, which are pretty comprehensive and forward looking, I'm pretty proud of them. Verisk has a very rich history servicing the financial services markets, which are heavily regulated. So, we're accustomed to variability and marketing strategy and budget availability due to outside influences, these macro influences that can impact the cost of customer acquisition. Um, as the advertising industry evolves, and specifically how we connect with consumers and capture and store and action on that information, as that becomes more regulated, I mean, there's a similar shift we all have to be conscious of across all categories of marketing. And I think that's something we all know very well, and it's front and center in just about every conversation I'm having. Um, so in addition to, our consumer audiences and our insights, Verisk Marketing Solutions owns and operates a compliance solution. And that compliance solution's been in the market for over a decade. The compliance is really in our DNA, and we're purpose built to adapt to changes in regulation. And we partner with a lot of privacy enhancing technologies to accelerate that value realization for our customers.
Yeah, and then I guess from a consumer perspective, obviously consumers are now holding companies more accountable than ever, and privacy is kind of a non-negotiable. What tactics, I guess, or what strategies do you guys take to ensure that consumer just stays at the forefront? Right, I can often feel like consumers aren't part of the conversation because we get so kind of into the conversation around buy side, sell side, tech, data, but actually consumers can kind of get forgotten in that mix. So how do we keep consumers, and I guess what advice would you give to other companies? How do you keep consumers at the forefront of everything you and your clients do?
I'm going to kind of flip that question on its head a little bit, and I'm going to quote your own CEO, Lauren. When she was on our podcast, I think she put it really well. She said, "You don't need to know, who a person is or have their personal identifiers exposed to you to understand, how they behave, what matters to them, and when they might be ready to hear your message. And so it's almost about like taking the consumer of the equation to some extent and focusing more on the insights, that experience that you can deliver absent that information. But I think we have mastered the ability to deliver our insights without exposing, anything sensitive or personal to the consumer. We've developed, entire applications that bring compute directly to the data versus bringing the data to the compute, and I think that's the way of the future. And then the great thing about marketing is it's quantifiable. So a consumer is part of every part of that equation, right? So we're delivering business outcomes, we're delivering higher quality engagements, we're delivering conversions, we're delivering transactions. Those things don't exist without a consumer taking some action.
And I think, as you say, it's keeping the consumer in it, but not having to expose the consumer at the same time. Is kind of the way this industry is moving. And obviously, this industry, as you touched on right at the start, moves at such an incredible pace. It's constantly changing. There are new trends emerging all the time. So, as we sit here coming to the end of the first quarter of 2025, what emerging trends in data, in analytics, and consumer insights do you kind of anticipate will have the most significant impact on the marketing industry in 2025 and beyond? And then how is Verisk kind of positioning itself to lead in those areas?
Yeah. Looking backward to look forward, I grew up in the what I would call maybe the sunset of a traditional offline direct marketing era. That's, where data brokers would source, catalog, and market consumer lists on behalf of brands and publishers, and then take a cut and pass back that rev share. Um, now brands and publishers are seeing the revenue opportunity, the competitive advantage, of owning and operating their own first party data. And the technology like now supports a variety of data sources and data connections that a single brand can just own and operate, without all these middlemen. And looking at the economics of it all, we middlemen in that context were certainly necessary to to solve, the transaction between two ends of the market. But now I think there's an opportunity to gain more efficiency, and that's what we're doing every day. Like if you think about, back to your question about what keeps me up at night, it's a continuum, and we're continuously trying to gain efficiencies. Um, the technology investment is, obviously a cheaper solve for a brand today than rev sharing on every dollar back to a broker. And then, but there'll always be gaps, there'll always be bias in the first party data, so second and third party data will always have a part to play. It's a critical ingredient. So really, I mean, I think as I look forward, what I'm most excited to see is, what sort of commercialization initiatives prove out across these brands and these publishers, and how can they actualize on these efficiencies.
I agree. And look, it's going to take people like you who are driving our industry forward, who are finding new, better ways to use data to create those experiences that we touched on right at the start. And that's what this podcast is all about. So when you look to people that you admire in the industry, who would you nominate for me to talk to on an upcoming episode of Identity Architect?
So Verisk Marketing Solutions, we just in 2024 we joined the Coalition of Innovative Media Measurement. So frankly, anyone from that group is an interesting candidate to speak to, both the people who sit on the board and the members, but also the people who facilitate the conversations. There's a woman that I've really come to know and love in the past few years. I mean, I consider her kind of a soulmate. Her name is Sable Me. She is a measurement genius, and she's chair of the identity committee at SEM. And she's also the most difficult person I've ever sold data to. So I figured,
Wow.
that might be a point of view you want to get on your podcast. And I always say about Sable, you wouldn't mind Sable if she was sitting on your side of the table. So that's my That's my rec.
I love that. We will definitely reach out to them and try and get them on the podcast. That sounds like it'd be a fascinating conversation. I love talking measurement, and I would love to kind of pick their brains and kind of dig into that for sure. Look, thank you so much for being on the podcast with me today. I've always find it interesting to learn more about how people are using data to drive those outcomes, to drive that kind of real efficiency. And it truly does sound like Verisk is kind of leading the charge there. So I really appreciate you being on the podcast with me today.
It was so much fun. Thank you, Ben.
Thanks again to Zora for being on the podcast. It's always so amazing and so inspiring to hear how companies are prioritizing the consumer and their privacy in all that they do. All that leaves for me to do is to remind you to hit that subscribe button to know when the next episode of Identity Architects lands. But until then, thanks for listening.